This next scene is a definite step up in complexity. So look at the large areas of foliage. Obviously we can't draw individual leaves, so we need to reduce this to blocks of tone. So a few bits of texture here and there, that should tell the viewer what it actually is that they're looking at. Now compositionally, this is a really nice photograph. You've got these steps which act as a natural lead-in towards the wall, which then points towards the stone cabin. And the cabin itself is the focal point. So we're going to spend more time and attention around this area, and then when I draw out the cabin, I'm also going to pay close attention to the perspective. So there's actually 3-point perspective going on here. We've got this side of the house which will go to a vanishing point over here. We've got this side of the house that will go to a vanishing point this side, and then the verticals of the house are not actually vertical, they're converging towards each other. So a vanishing point would be up here somewhere off camera. If you're not sure about perspective and 3-point perspective, have a look at the Drawing Essentials course. It's not too difficult a concept, but you do need to be aware of it for drawings like this. Now as we move away from the stone cabin, we're going to get looser, we're going to get less defined. These steps in the foreground here, these can be really sketchy. We can just do basic outlines for these. Now if you defocus your eyes, squint them down, you'll notice the dark values. So you've got a nice dark value here, you've got a dark value up here, this is a reasonably dark value, and then you've got a really dark value for the house. And what that does is it helps to create a frame within the picture. So the steps are framed within these darker values. So the target time for this one is around about 15 minutes. So the cabin being the focal point, that having the most complexity, that's where we want to start. That's a good place to start. So again, we can look at the center of the cabin and just roughly get that in place. And then the top edge of the roof here, if you need to, measure your angles. You can do this when you're drawing in life as well, from life as well. If you're out on location, you can hold your pencil up against those angles and make sure you get those right. You've got the angle here coming down. So there is some tricky perspective here, and that's because our vantage point is so low down. And remember, these lines are not vertical. They're slightly, ever so slightly converging. So this one would be that sort of shape there. And I do find it helps if you extend your lines as well, and that way it just helps you to just see the proportions more easily. So, you know, this roof comes to here. You can't really see that line because it's hidden behind the trees. And then we've got the line of the wall there, so this line here. And then we can draw in just the basic embankment to give an indication that there's foliage there. And then this tree, I think, is a good idea to get this tree in, because again, it helps to frame the picture, stops the viewer's eye from leaving it, and it completes almost the 4 corners to keep the viewer from looking elsewhere. So we've got a tree here, put that in as a basic oval for now. Background trees there. We can just put those in as a simple angle for now, more than anything else. And then we've got this tree that is creeping in on the left-hand side, so we can put that in. Now for the steps are really important to get in. Instead of drawing individual steps at this stage, I just want to look at the basic shape that they make. So this is a triangular shape, so I can look at the angle, any angles that they make, and then look at this step here where there's a turn in the steps, and then I can start to look at the angles of individual ones as individual steps as we can see them. So this step here is probably bigger than you think it is. And the way that you can gauge that is just look how far does it come across. So the inclination when you're drawing this step is to draw it, you know, the same size as the steps above it, but because of the foreshortening effect, you know, things in the distance are smaller than things in the foreground. This step is a lot bigger than what you initially might think. And that's a good thing to observe and a good thing to put in, because it will add a sense of drama and a sense of interest to an otherwise really loose and sketchy drawing. And then we don't need to put any details in here other than maybe some, basic shapes to define this as an embankment. So there's our basic outline drawing. I'm going to stick with the HB pencil now and start to add some texture, start to render things. So let's start with the cabin. That's our focal point. Let's concentrate on that to begin with. So I'm using vertical hatching marks here, just leaving an area there for the tree. Do the same again, but we will go over this. So same for this side. And the reason that I'm just doing it with a HB pencil, just to quickly fill in the area, but also some of those marks will show through after we go over with a 2B or a 4 or 5B. I'm going to switch now to this is the 2B. In fact, I'm going to go to a 5B because these values are really, really strong. So, we talked about being really bold. And try and leave some of the marks underneath showing through, just because it adds a little bit of texture, extra bit of interest to an otherwise fairly solid shape. The roof under here, shadow area under there. Bit of cross hatching just to vary the mark making. Darker value around the bottom. Really dark in here. Basically getting rid of all the white of the paper. Back to the HB just so we can put in this roof line. We've got the chimney as well that I've forgotten to draw in. So just make sure that you observe the angle lines of the chimney. And then for the window, like we did with the lighthouse, instead of just doing it as one solid black shape, let's do it darker on one side, and then just leave a little bit of area that's lighter, and it just again helps to, or gives the viewer something to fill in with their own mind. And then with your HB pencil or your 2B pencil, you can give a little bit of an indication of some of the stonework. So on buildings like this, it's a good idea to do just the corner. But what I'm doing is I'm just checking the angles so that I don't ruin the sense of perspective. Just remembering what they are. And then you can just put in one or two indications that there's some stonework on the corner of the building. And then let's carry that dark value through into the wall. And if you notice what I'm doing, instead of just filling it all the way to the bottom, I'm just leaving this rough edge, and that's going to give this silhouette effect of foliage underneath. So it's as though you're drawing it negatively. I want to leave a little bit of texture in the wall, instead of it just being one black mark. And I don't want the value to be quite as strong as the house, again, because we're moving away from the focal point. So therefore, we don't want to de-emphasize that focal point by using as stronger values elsewhere. Bit jutting out there, so there's going to be a shadow on there. And then back to the HB. For this area of distant trees, I'm going to use much lighter pressure. It's in the distance. So aerial perspective says that anything that's in the distance is lighter than it is in the foreground, is a more muted tone. And I'm using short, sharp marks. And what I'm hoping that will do is just give the impression of tree lines, but quite heavy, dense tree lines in the distance, rather than just using one solid shape. So short, sharp marks, and what you'll get are these little areas of sort of light and dark in between. I'm taking it all the way through as well, by the way, so even though this, is covered in the photograph with other foliage, it just helps to give a layered effect that will show through when you come to do the foliage on top of it. Vertical marks as well, so I wouldn't do these diagonally or horizontally. I'm trying to do them in the way that the trees would grow, and just basically show or give an impression that there's something there in the distance that's more than just a solid block of tone. So you can add some darker areas, just increasing the pressure of the pencil slightly. You see darker areas around here, trees that creep in at the top there. Now for this foliage in the top left hand corner, I'm not even going to attempt to draw leaves or even make it look like a tree. I'm just going to fill this in with horizontal hatching, just as a block of value. Can leave some gaps in. That'll help to give an impression that it isn't just one solid shape there. But really strong. This is a 2B pencil, I think. And then same for this bit that's come down here. So just varying the pressure that I use. So I'm just seeing some darker darks around here. Even go to a heavier pencil, 4, 5, 6B, whatever you've got, right in the corner there. And then we have got some thin branches there, and that's all that you really need to give the impression that it is, you know, a foliage or trees, series of trees. And the reason I'm making the marks all in this direction is, well, it's just a stylistic thing, but when you've got something that's potentially a little bit scruffy if you're doing it very quickly, using marks all in one direction, predominantly in one direction, just helps to stop things from being too scruffy and too haphazard, I find. We can do the same around here, so you can put this tree in. So I've left a little bit of negative space there. All I'm going to do is on one side, just a bit of diagonal hatching, and that should describe the tree. That's all I need to do for that tree. You can do a few branches coming off if you want to, and then this is almost scumbling, I guess you would call it, just to give indication of leaves and things that are going across the house. When you go across the house itself, you might need some darker values, so grab your 6, 7B, 5B, whatever it is you're using. Darker value under here. It just helps to define this area. And then we've got a tree here, so I've left a little bit of a white line. I don't know if you could see that from earlier. And then I can carry that on as a dark line there. Again, a few indications, a bit of an impression of branches, and then just a bit of scumbling, just to add a little bit of texture. And now let's deal with the steps. So what I'm going to do for these top steps is each individual step. And really it's nothing more than a line. I want to vary the shape of the line, the thickness of them. As I'm looking at them, I can see some of them are thicker than others. Some of them are kind of on an angle and sloping. Some of them are really straight. What I'm trying to achieve are thin white lines in between each dark shape. So you can see the thin white lines there. Well, these ones are a bit wider. And obviously as you get further down the steps, you can start making each one thicker or deeper. Just trying not to make them too uniform. Let's work out where the last one will be. So we do the last one here. So just breaking up the shape a bit more as you get closer. There we go. And then when I get to these ones here, so remember we said that we're just literally giving an impression as we get further down the page. So this is the furthest point away from the focal point. So all I'm going to do for these are just the major dark values, so the major blocks of tone where it exists, and a basic outline shape more than anything else. So hit and miss line, do some tone there. We've got this one. It's the shadow side of this from the step there. Bit of shadow on this one maybe. Okay, and then for this area here, so you've got this big dark area here, 5B, 4B pencil, the softest one that you've got, and again, just diagonal marks, doesn't need to be, you don't need any kind of texture or detail in here. I'm just looking at the dark shapes, so squinting my eyes, looking for those blocks of tone and value, and just putting that in really, really quickly. This is an opportunity to get really loose, really carefree. As I get a little bit closer up, I'm just reducing that value, so you can see it's really dark here and the value is reducing. And then we can carry that on by looking for dark areas just in amongst the foliage, where there's maybe rocks creeping out, maybe just areas between weeds and bushes and branches. So we do a darker area around this side of the steps, this side here, and this side as well. What it helps to do is just frame those steps, so it brings more attention to them. A few dots and dashes in that corner just to fill the space. So there we go, I've used all my time up on this one now. You might want to spend a little bit longer, maybe put a little bit more work into this area, but the most important thing is you stick to the allotted time. Have a go this one. When you finish that, do it again, do it 3 times, try and beat your time each go, and then come back and join me for the next lesson.